It's another episode of Oops All Dragons. It's it's Lisa. It's me. How you doing?
Varun here. And then we also have a guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Mike.
Oh, good morning, everybody. Afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening to this. I'm Michael, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you.
Yeah.
So,
What are you doing? What have you done?
well, I was gonna say to give a little background. Michael is an old school player who is a friend of our previous guest Nathan. So, A to B, B to C. He's on the show now. But before
We're keeping it in the family.
Exactly. But before we get into the D&D, into the nuts and bolts, yes, Michael, what have you been up to that's not D&D related?
Oh, gosh. Besides yield work, I've been spending a lot of time watching some of the backlog of both the Marvel and the DC universe on the various streaming things on TV, and
Okay.
I've been kind of enjoying that, yeah.
Where'd you get to? Like, what did you get to last?
Well, I've pretty much gotten through all the Marvel stuff, and now I'm working on the DC stuff, and over on, I guess it's HBO Max, there's just so much
There's
stuff.
a lot.
My God, yeah, and I try and do things in timeline order, so I've been spending a lot of time just kind of figuring out what came first. The chicken or the egg, yeah.
I mean, with a lot of the DC, the HBO shows, there is no, like, timeline. Because, like, if you're watching, like, Doom Patrol, I talked about that one before, that's not connected to any of the movies or anything. That's its own thing. If you're watching Titans, I think that's its own thing. But then if you're
right
watching
now
the
I'm-
movies, they're chronological.
Yeah, right now I'm kind of into the Harley Quinn stuff, so I'm watching. I finished Birds of Prey and Suicide Squad, and I'm doing the cartoon right now, which I'm really enjoying.
I hear that's good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I hear it highly involves Kite Man, which,
Yes, it does, as a matter of fact.
give some Kite Man love in 2021.
It's something. It's something to behold. It really is.
All right. So Lisa, what about you? What you been up to?
Not much. I was starting to get into it in the preamble, and Varun was just like, "No, save it."
Content. This is content.
No casual conversations with friends. It's all content. Yesterday I went to Disneyland. Have you heard of this? Have you heard of this place? It's called Disneyland.
Mayhaps.
It's crazy. It's like a whole thing, right? It's so packed. It was so packed. And I got to ride Rise of the Resistance, which is a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, you are so
and-
lucky there.
Yeah,
I have friends who have been waiting. I mean, I have friends who have annual passes who go all the time who haven't been on it yet.
Yeah, no, I just oh boy, no, I can't explain how I got into the park because that there's some things there that there's lore there, but we got into the park. We got there a little late, and they've actually opened it up from being reservation only. Which is like a weird thing because I think they're testing out
Reservation for a frickin' theme park
for a ride. The thing is I also thought like that's dumb. That sounds so stupid. But once you ride the ride, because it's more than a ride. It's an experience.
What is it?
I almost don't want to explain it because it's.
Spoilers?
It's so bonkers when you're in there because,
God.
I went with my boyfriend and he did not explain it to me. He's been on it once before. He didn't explain it to me. He let me talk my shit. We got into, like, the first... Like, I don't even want to say, like, oh, my God, I've already said too much. We get into it.
Spoiler alert. There you go. Now you can
Yeah.
say everything that you want to say.
Major spoilers. Like, skip 2.5 minutes if you don't want to get spoiled for Rise of the Resistance, which
For
is
a
like
theme park ride. That's,
Rude.
your enjoyment
Believe you
is just
me,
not
I
going to
was
be
also
there.
I was
if
as
you know what's
skeptical as
happening.
you are.
No, it's not that. It's like I am very over spoiler culture of like if you know anything about a thing, your enjoyment is not going to be there because of it. I'm like, just tell me about it, goddammit, and I might write it one day.
That's true. Okay, fine. But for the people who care, spoiler alert.
Yes.
So you get in there, and you get put in this little transpo, and you're supposed to be getting getting snuck out of one place to another place, and cause you're part of the resistance, whatever.
Okay.
And then your ship gets captured, and you get boarded, and then the little transpo thing you're on opens.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, one of the cast members comes in there and is like, "Everybody get out! You're prisoners now." And you walk in through the same door you came into. When you walk in, you walk through a little piece that's outdoors.
Okay.
And through the same door you walk into, it opens up again, and you're inside of a Star Destroyer.
Nice. So
And-
they shift scenes on you while you're in the ride.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And you look out, and it's shiny black floors, and there's a line of stormtroopers that are clearly mannequins because they're standing entirely too still. But it's so jarring. It's so cool, and they walk you through, and they basically walk you through a Star Destroyer. And I'm
Nice.
where were you keeping all of this? And it's Kylo Ren's ship. So they put you in a little prison cell, and then clearly a projection, but it's General Hux comes in, and he's like, we're gonna get the location of the rebel base out of you. And then Kylo comes in, and he's like, and then there's and then part of the wall opens up, and it's a jailbreak, and then the real ridey part of the ride starts, where it's you get into a little buggy, and you're whipping ass around this fucking facility, and it is
Oh my
massive.
God.
How big is your group?
Massive.
How big is your group that's doing this?
It's
How
what was the question?
The how many people go on the ride with you? At the
Yeah,
same
how
time?
how many people in the group? It's a big
it
group. Or?
It could, so each the buggy could fit I think 8 people, but when you go into the first little transport, I think it could fit 20 people.
Wow.
Okay.
So
So
they
there's
put 20 people,
multiple
and then they
buggies.
separate you into groups. So that when you can, there's 2 sets of a prison cells basically.
Okay.
It is so cool, and I am not as much of a Star Wars nerd as a lot of people that I know.
Mm-hmm.
It's I like it, I like it enough.
Mm-hmm.
Given my circumstances. This shit blew my mind.
Sounds cool.
It really did. Just because I am also a theme park enjoyer,
Mm-hmm.
and just
I'm not, and that sounds cool.
Yeah.
I need to see the blueprints of this. Just I need to see what does this building look like, because they've managed to make from the outside it just looks it doesn't look like much.
Mm-hmm.
It just looks like a mountain scape kind of thing, but in there I need to see the mechanics of this. It is so buck wild, and
Now,
me explaining it will not ruin the experience, because seeing it
Mm-hmm.
is something else.
Which I think is something most people nowadays need to learn. You can know a thing about a thing and still enjoy
Yeah.
it.
I worked at Disneyland for a number of years, and
Mm-hmm.
it's incredible the amount that they hide backstage.
Mm-hmm.
The Haunted Mansion, you just see that big building out front. It is way huger than that, and it's all hidden behind the berm. You would never know it if you didn't know how the ride operates.
Okay.
Yeah. That was the other thing we got to do. We got to do the Haunted Mansion holiday, and that was very cute. And I had to like tip my hat because boyfriend and I keep having the discussion of, well, not really. It's just me being annoying of being like, well, Disney World has the Epcot ball, but like
Disney
we don't
World has
decorate the
Haunted
Haunted Mansion.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
Disney World doesn't decorate the Haunted Mansion, but we do get Jingle Cruise. They don't have Jingle Cruise.
Okay.
Jingle
The Jungle Cruise doesn't. I love the Jingle Cruise. It's just the Jungle Cruise, but the skipper's wearing a different
Yep.
hat. It's great.
Okay.
Disneyland.
So-
Anyway, that's all I've been up to. Is just
Sure, sounds
being
fun.
a corporate chill.
Nothing major on my side. I replayed Super Robot Wars V. That game's so good. If you're a super robot lover like I am, it's a very good interpretation of all those stories. And then watching. I haven't started Hawkeye actually. Hawkeye, Cowboy Bebop, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, all those things are like on the docket. They came out and I haven't touched any of them yet.
Really, I expected you to have at least started Cowboy Bebop.
Nova wants to watch it with me, so like we'll do it together. And
Oh,
yeah, from what I hear, it's kind of divisive. So I'm like, all right, let me
That's
go.
what I
in.
get too.
Let me go in and see myself. I hope from what I'm hearing, it's like they touch on some of the stuff from the anime, but like do their own thing. Because Bebop is a very episodic show where there's just all this weird stuff going around, and the Bebop crew usually just like stumbles into it at some point. So they don't need to like remake every single episode from the anime. They can do their own stuff. So I hope they do some of that. But yeah, other than that, I've been playing Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. That's pretty fun. But yeah, nothing else major going on here.
Speaking of playing things, let me plug, what is it, Deep Rock Galactic. Just started playing that. You get to play a space dwarf, and it's a combination of mining, so it's a kind of a crafting game. Plus, you get to fight off hordes of enemy bugs, and it's a cooperative 4-player game. It's really a lot of fun. Really well done.
Okay.
Been playing that a lot and interestingly enough, with all the people I know from D&D.
All right.
Speaking of D&D,
Yes.
speaking of,
You see, this guy's an expert. Perfect transition.
let's talk some D&D.
So you're a nerd, right?
I am a what you call an old school nerd. I originally got introduced to D&D back in, believe it or not, 81, my sophomore year in high school. So probably before a lot of the people who are playing it nowadays were even born.
Both of us, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Started out with, which is cool. I love it. I love the fact that it's made a resurgence in the recent years, and it's really brought a lot of people together who wouldn't ordinarily have been playing together. Interestingly enough, you guys know Nate. Nate is in your age range, so I'm playing with guys anywhere from their mid-20s to all the way up to their mid-50s, which is great. I started out originally with, believe it or not, AD&D back in the day. That was quite a different game than it is today.
I've seen a little bit of advanced D&D because the person who got me into D&D, that was their system as well. I'm just like, I looked at 5th edition and I looked at AD&D 2nd edition, and I'm just like, what is this?
Yeah.
What are these words that I'm
Very
seeing?
different.
You want to explain some of the differences between?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
In AD&D, the first thing is AD&D stuck really closely to the Trinity. There were tanks, there were DPS, and there were healers. There were no such things as war clerics or tempest clerics who got up on the front line and did their own thing. In fact, when I joined the group, we were a group of people who were playing tabletop games, so games with minis. And one week, this guy showed up and he said, "Hey, I got this new game I found at the comic book store. It's called D&D, Dungeons and Dragons." And we're like, "What's that?" And we all decided to play. I was the last person to join that group. And when I showed up, everybody said, "Oh, great, you get to be the cleric," because nobody wanted to be nobody wanted to be the cleric, because in that format, clerics could not use sharp or pointed weapons, no weapons that drew blood.
Wow.
So really, you stood in the back line and you healed people, and of course, everybody wants to be up front hacking and slashing. So I started off, my first character ever was a cleric. And back then, druid, that was just another subclass of clerics. You were a cleric, but with trees. I could spend all day talking about the difference of the mathematics between it, because your armor class was different.
Talk about how armor class and Thaco worked, because I think that would break some people's brains these days.
Yeah, in the AD&D, the lower your armor class, the better. So what we were trying to shoot for is an armor class of 1 or 2 or 3, rather than an armor class of 20, 21. Armor class was, God, I mean, you're going to challenge me to remember my mathematics now of how it worked. Basically, everything was almost in reverse of the way you look at it today. And it was much more math oriented. There were a lot more figures in terms of how damage was done. It just was completely a different game. I mean, the mathematic part, the mechanics part.
It got very crunchy, and I think that kind of went over into third edition as well. Yeah,
third edition. I didn't play a lot of third edition, but it was really a resurgence of the number crunching that you found in AD&D. But AD&D was a different world back then. Everything was pencil and paper, basically everybody either homebrewed your own dungeon, or you bought a module. There were no, in modules those days, you didn't get this thick book. If anybody's seen Rime of the Frost Maiden, you know what I'm talking about by a thick book. Your module was a trifold, 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and a map inside. And that was it.
That was the whole thing.
That was the whole module. And, so your DM really had to come up with a lot of stuff on their own and kind of fly by the seat of their pants, because really it was just a bunch of stat blocks and a brief description of the scenario. It was funny, when I started playing with the group that I'm playing with right now, of course, we're playing 5e now. And I showed up at my first game, and I brought out this book of graph paper and a bunch of pencils, and everybody looked at me like I was crazy. As they started pulling out phones and tablets and stuff. I was like, "What's this? Who's going to draw the map?" It was a very different world, and we had, you had crappy dice back then that were made out of low impact plastic.
Oh yeah, I've seen some of those original dice. It is a task if they survive this long.
Yeah,
and they're not all rounded to hell.
No, they're rounded off. Yeah, after 6 months of play, your D20 looked more like a sphere than it did a polyhedral die. But I have really a lot of fond memories of those days. I got to play some of the original modules. Some of my favorites were the G modules, the giant modules. I don't know how familiar you guys are, but I'll for our audience, yeah, let me tell you, each module was coded by a letter and a number. So G1, G2, G3. those were the giant modules, and it started off with steading of the hill giant chief, which you kind of infiltrated a hill giant stronghold to find out why the giants were ravaging the local townships, which led you then to the glacial rift of the frost giant Jarl, which is was going through a glacial cavern. Third module was the Hall of the Fire Giant King, which was a volcanic region, and each module led into the next. And
You're hitting all the giant types.
Yeah. So you'd go through all those, and then there was a fourth and a fifth module, which you found out. Spoiler alert, I guess. You found out that the Drow were involved, and yeah, and so you get to go through the descent of the depths of the earth, the D modules, and then finally the Queen of the Demon Web pits, where you confronted Loth on the Demon Web pits in the abyss. Now, if you really are interested in what 80s artwork looked like, look up the Queen of the Demon Web pits and see what the cover of that module looked like. It's great. But I really enjoyed some of those, and if anybody is interested in playing those, I can tell you the giant modules are part of the Yawning Portal module, so they've been updated to 5e, so you can play through some of those. But in those days, you really didn't have much of a backstory for your character. You didn't really have any downtime activities. There were no shopping episodes. Basically, your DM plopped you down in front of the dungeon and said, "There it is." And your motivation was, well, these guys are evil. We're good. They have treasure. Let's go.
I was gonna say, so one, I was looking up that artwork. Yes, extremely 80s.
Insane.
But then
I love that Lilith is just. It's just a spider with a lady face.
Giant spider. Giant spider with a lady's face on it.
Yeah.
But that was the next thing. Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, the only other thing I was gonna note about this artwork, the heroes here are Height and male.
Yes. Yeah,
that checks out. That checks out.
It was a sign of the times, basically.
Yeah, yeah. It's how things have changed.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
So yeah, that was gonna be my first question, just asking you about like what were the games like, and I know especially from like first and second edition, D&D was definitely more gamified, of just in the sense of there weren't episodes where you could just shop the entire time, or you were there, you were the good guys, and you had to slay evil, and that's that's the game. Coming from your perspective of like that's what the game was, and then kind of morphing into what it is today.
It was very different when I started playing 5e and started playing with the guys that I'm playing with now, and the years since. I've been with the same group of people. Gosh, I think we just passed either 4 or 5 years.
Oh, good for you guys.
We're together. In fact, if I can, I'd like to give a shout out to everybody I'm playing with. This is the list of people that I'm either currently playing with or have been part of our group and continue to be part of our group. And that would be Nate, who was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. Richard, Joe, Rick, Brenda, Jan, Jenna, Larry, Zach, Brody, Ken, Terry, Corey, and Kaylin. Yeah, we actually
that's a lot of people.
Yeah, and not everybody plays in every game, obviously. But the funny thing is back a couple weeks ago, what we do is people have moved to other parts of the country, and with COVID, we didn't get to play in person a lot. But a couple of weeks ago, we all got together for one game. That Nate ran an episode of his original campaign that we started with. We were all level 16, and literally the turn order took like an hour to complete.
Yeah, I assume
Oh my
so.
god, yeah.
Yeah, it was, but it was great. It was great fun, and it was
Sure.
great to get all together, everybody, 14, 15 people in the same room,
My
all
God.
playing D&D together.
It's crazy.
But to talk about the difference between AD&D and my origins and today, it really threw me for a loop actually, because I was used to, well, what's our motivation? Our motivation is we're good, and there's treasure, and
Yeah.
there were alignment really was codified, good and evil. There were no like I said, no backstories, no interactions between the characters, no character development really.
Mm-hmm.
It was just literally get into the dungeon and slay things. So when I started playing with these guys, I was like, okay, let's get in the dungeon and slay things. And they're like, no, we gotta prep, and we gotta talk to the NPCs, and we gotta run around town. And I'm like, well, when are we gonna hack and slash?
Oh man,
Yeah.
I think that's where I think that's at least a version of that is where a lot of murder hoboing comes from these days. And I know like it's not exactly the same thing, but I think there D&D still has that, I don't know, stigma or just like that perception that the game is just all about fighting, which used to be true, but is definitely not today.
Oh, it's developed so much in the last years. Um, I think with the proliferation of the internet, we get to watch other people play, and that I actually spend a lot of my time on YouTube watching other people play D&D.
Mm-hmm.
I have some podcasts and some streaming and YouTube episodes that I follow closely. And in fact, I know I'm getting a little ahead of the episode, but if I was going to give a tip to somebody, probably my biggest tip is to watch other people play D&D. If you're interested in DMing yourself, which I'm a big advocate of, watch other people DM. There's some really great DMs out there, and
Who
if
do you
get
watch?
if you get to watch them, you get an opportunity to learn from them. I'm still learning how to be a good DM from watching other people DM and seeing what they do and how they treat their players and how they treat their characters and
Mm-hmm.
the like I said, with the advent of a lot more of a social interplay among the characters, I pick up all kinds of tips and tricks all the time.
Yeah, I'll second that. Who do you watch?
Right now, I got a couple of favorites. I'm watching a group called A Filthy Quest Line. They're out of Canada, as well as a group named Dork Tales.
Okay. Nate mentioned
And
them.
yeah, I'm a big fan of Dimension 20. I think they do a really fine job. There's a couple of webisodes that I watch that are more DM related. Things like Matthew Colville. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you've heard of him. Ginny D.
Oh
There's a
yeah,
guy out there
her.
called, yeah, the girl with the green hair.
Yeah.
And there's a guy out there called Seth Sorkowski. He does mostly Call of Cthulhu things, but he's got some really great videos on how to be a good DM and how to be a good player. There's another guy, Tulok the Barbarian, or a Barbraian is actually how it's spelled.
He misspelled
Um,
it.
He does a lot of really fun videos. If you want to play such and such fictional character in D&D, this is how to build it.
Oh.
So if you want to be Batman in D&D,
Oh, I've had a
if
guy
you-
who's done that. Of like, he wants to play Deadpool, so like he built out his character like Deadpool, or Batman. Yeah, he built out his character like Batman.
yeah, and he's got a lot of videos on how to do how to how to be Yoda in D&D.
Oh my god.
Just all kinds of. I mean, he's really got probably a good 100 videos maybe of just different fictional characters and how to be them in D&D. So I steal a lot of his ideas. Like any good DM, I love building characters. So I've got a folder that's full of character sheets for things that I want to play. In fact, my group kids me about having a death wish whenever I'm a player, just so I can kill off this character and try the next one.
Honestly, totally fair. I did just ask Austin if, like, hey, if you haven't set anything in motion yet, can we kill my character? I've got another character. And he was like, but I've already got plans. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I don't want to mess up your thing. Like, let's go. Let's do the thing. Let's see what happens. If I die, I die, though. Like, I won't be mad.
Yeah, don't hold back on them.
We don't need to have a whole quest to get my character. It's cool. I got another one.
Layla's so easy to kill, too. Just one fireball and she'd be out.
Fire. Any fire. I've almost killed her so many times.
Yeah.
Speaking of almost killing a character, I wanted to address the story that Nate told a couple of weeks ago about Ijar Gix. I was the DM on that game, and
this is his kobold, right?
This is his kobold. For those of you who haven't heard this podcast, Nate created a kobold that was a dex-based paladin. And I was running them through the Tales of the Yawning Portal, as a matter of fact. And they got to this one point where there was a, quote, rope bridge spanning a chasm. Now, I've received a lot of flack for this, and I heard you guys chime in on it, too. It was not a wooden bridge supported by ropes. Mm-hmm. It was a rope bridge, which really was constituted by a single strand of rope running down the middle with two strands on each side to hold on and balance. Mm-hmm. Now, there's even a picture of it in the Yawning Portal. So I had a picture in my head of what this rope bridge looked like. Everybody else assumed what you guys assumed was it's a wooden bridge supported by ropes. I think Lisa even suggested the bridge in
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones or
Shrek.
That's the
there
one.
we go. Shrek, that's the one. And
Shrek is my point of reference for like 90% of things.
So Ijar started off going across the rope, and there's a dex check about halfway across to see if you can maintain your balance. So I had him roll a dex check, which everybody was surprised by because, it wasn't a crumbly old bridge, but they didn't get the concept of what I was thinking of. Mm-hmm. And so I had him roll the dex check, which he failed. Now remember, this is a dex-based character, and the DC for this dex check was 10. Whoa. He got another dex check to see if he could grab onto the rope as he was falling, which was also 10. He failed that one. So, I gotta weigh in that the dice were against him that day, and he fell to his death. He fell to his death in the chasm, but it wasn't really his death. We'll get to that in a second. But I learned a really valuable lesson out of that, though, and that is, as a DM, I need to be as descriptive as possible.
Oh yeah.
I need to paint the picture that I see in my head for my players. Mm-hmm. So nowadays, when I have a situation where I really want them to know what's going on, not only am I extra descriptive, I sometimes even get out the pencil and paper and draw a rough sketch or a picture of what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So everybody is on the same page and knows what we're talking about, because some of them were like, oh man, that's not fair. We thought it was a different kind of bridge. The good news is Gix survived the fall, as those listeners who heard the podcast know, and he is now a reoccurring character in a lot of our campaigns. And since then, I've taken it upon myself, maybe even out of a bit of guilt, to keep him alive. So I've played clerics and other healers when he's been around, and I try my best to not let that little kobold pass away. So. He has become a reoccurring theme now, which is kind of fun.
Okay.
Exactly.
No, I think that's absolutely, like, I like that as a lesson, because that's not one of the ones that we usually hear from other folks coming in. But like every DM has run into that when they start with a new group or just when they're starting out in general, of just like describe things thoroughly, because if you do not, there's going to be a point where someone misinterprets something and it gets them killed.
I think that's just like, we've all had that like situation at work with friends where you're seeing something clearly in your head, and to you you're explaining it well, but like you're missing just like one piece of information that if you just said that, it would make everything clearer for everybody. So you kind of have to be very thorough in your descriptions.
I can remember one scenario. It was back when we were playing some Pathfinder. It was me, my brother, Saul, and some other folks. And Lisa, you know who Saul is, and he's going to be on this podcast at some point. But he's one of our friends that we play with. But they've been playing their main campaign for a while, and they just wanted to play some other characters because it'd been months and they'd made a lot of progress. But they're like, we just want to try out some other characters, some other classes, because this was all of our first role playing experiences. So they just wanted to try out some different stuff. So like, okay, let's do like a side thing with some different characters, and you just go do a little module or whatever. And Saul creates Drenyan, we just call him Catman because he's a cat folk race, but he's old, and being old in Pathfinder means that you have negative stats. Like being old, you just like your constitution goes to crap, and you're just easier to kill. And I'm just like, I'm looking at his sheet, and I'm like, okay, he's like a powerful caster, but he's taking this big dip in con because he's an old gray cat man. So I'm like, oh, okay, like, all right, this is kind of dangerous, but if this is what you want to play, all right. And immediately we start the module, and I just described like the layout of the place, and there's a courtyard, and there's some trees, and a fence, and a well. And there's a building behind it, and they're supposed. I didn't write this, but like whoever created this module, they're supposed to go to the building, and the building is where the thing happens. And he's like, okay, no, let me go investigate this well. Okay, so he goes to investigate the well, and in the well there is like a demon or something. There's like some enemy, and because he is old, again, he has bad eyesight in Pathfinder. So he rolls very low on his perception to see what's going on with this well. And I'm just like, okay. It's like, if they fail their perception roll a thing to see if this thing attacks them, and it does. And so it's just like, oh, he goes over to look at the well. He doesn't see anything. And then he dies because a demon jumps out and just stabs him and kills him. And the game just stopped at that point. We had gotten 5 minutes in, and I had murdered Saul. And he loved this character. And they all introduced their characters ahead of time, and he made an old man voice, and he loved playing this old cat man. And I just murdered him immediately because I didn't make it clear that this is this is your path. This is the thing that you need to focus on. And then him being a caster just runs up to something else, and it absolutely kills him. And there's just 5 minutes. No, 1 minute where everything was just silent, and then 5 minutes of just what do we do?
Yeah, it's always hard when the characters, I call it going left. The characters go left. Mm-hmm. You've set up everything for them to go right, and you know what's going to happen, and they go left, and something tragic like that happens.
Yeah. It's I think it was there's definitely the thing of you don't want to box them in, but I could have also been this is where you need to go. This is the thing. Don't worry about the well. But yeah, that was one of those scenarios. That was one of the few scenarios where someone like died or something bad happened. I'm just like, let's rewind that, because like we've already spent all the time to gather up together. We've already introduced your character, and like we're to kill him off 5 minutes into the module. Like that's not
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like one thing if you're like getting at least like an hour in, but 5 minutes in,
Literally,
yeah, you gotta
like
run that back.
We just started, and his character just died, and it wasn't like a terrible hit that like a super powerful demon, but his character was so old and so frail that just like any kind of hit, it would take him down, and it just like the thing rolled just high enough to take him down, and go double his health to just go into negative health and kill him. So, describe the lesson. Describe what's in your head, folks.
Yeah, exactly.
It saves lives.
Exactly.
I'm gonna give a. On the other hand, sometimes, players are just not on the same wavelength, and my example is as a player very early on in the game that Varun has been running forever for us. The succubus thing, Varun.
Oh, yeah.
Varun so thoroughly described the succubus, but he just never used the word succubus. And I was just like, what is he?
To this day,
So
I still don't know how you didn't get it. I didn't say it out because no one made a nature roll to just like figure out, or an arcana or anything to figure out like what is she.
She was projecting a vision into my head. Like, I'm pretty sure I was making those rolls. I don't know. It was also very early on for me as far as like
this
playing.
is like our
so I wasn't
third session or something like that.
Yeah, it was like my first real campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was. I was also just stupid. So like, if you're DMing and you feel like you're explaining very thoroughly, and like Varun said, all it would take for your players to get an answer or a definitive sort of thing is a roll, and your players are still like scratching their heads over it. That's not your fault.
Yeah. That kind of reminds me of another. Yeah, I'm full of tips today. So, tip number 2.
Good.
Your monsters are smart if you're a DM. If you have an evil monster like a succubus, who's an intelligent creature, play her intelligently. A true succubus, at least in my head, would not step out with full wings unfolded and fangs and blood red skin. She's a seductress, and she's going to try and seduce you into your own death. And you should play her that way. It challenges your players. It gives them something to play against. And it takes us once again away from that whole old school hack and slash murder hobo scenario, where you're presented with an evil creature and you kill it. This really makes you have to think about it and decide how to approach it. And as a player, I appreciate that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, Varun's very good about it. In that particular encounter, like, she was kind of just minding her business, and we were sent to just bother her. In retrospect,
you were sent by the cops to go handle some business.
Yeah, and like when you're working for the cops, and like, I think I was still working under the impression that like what D&D is that old thing of just like you see bad creature you kill, and it was a choice. It's led to further interesting things during the campaign, but like me as a player, I've had to learn that like no, don't encounter every scenario with an Eldritch Blast ready to go. That's dumb.
Yeah,
that charisma stat's there for a reason.
Yeah, that's a great point. Another thing that I learned as a DM. Here's tip number 3: have more than one source of information for your characters. I was
That,
DMing
yes.
I was DMing a one shot, and there was a goblin that had important information for the characters. It was a beneficial NPC, and immediately upon approaching it, one of my players took out an arrow and shot it in the face.
Oh my god.
Why does it
It's
feel like every single week, every single interview we do, it feels like there's some story about some goblin that had information and that the players killed immediately.
So yeah, make
feel
sure
like
that when you're DMing that there's something else that's going to provide them with this information. Because then at that moment, I
Gotta
panicked
tap
a little
dance.
bit and thought, how am I going to progress the story now that they've killed their one source of information on where to go next?
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Yeah.
You gotta learn how to tap dance. Gotta learn how to.
Gotta diversify your information portfolio.
Yeah.
Speaking of tap dancing, I'm DMing a campaign right now that I'm actually really proud of. I'm going to speak on the campaign a little bit, if that's okay, and
Yeah,
then
please do.
give you the tap dancing story. The campaign, I for the first time ever, I've decided to entirely homebrew a campaign. So
Nice.
it's not set in Faerun. I am homebrewing all the monsters. So basically, what I'm doing is I'm taking the monster manual and picking and choosing abilities, and then I give them a whole new skin because the players I'm playing with are really seasoned. I mean, like I said, we've been playing together for 4 or 5 years now. So if I describe a monster to them or a creature, they know immediately what it is and what its stat block is, and how it functions. And so I've really been challenged to kind of come up with something new. But something really neat I'm doing in this campaign is I've made it a collaborative campaign. So basically, I set a rule where the players can add things to the world. They can make the world the way they want it to be. The basic rule is as long as it doesn't break the game, and everybody, including myself, agree that it's a cool thing to do, it happens, or it exists, or it's part of the world. And that has really opened up the game to a really interactive scenario, and I'm really enjoying that. But the tap dancing part was one of the characters became cursed, who is a Goliath, and is really large for a Goliath. And they needed to chain him up to prevent him from going on a murder spree. And someone suggested, let's get some manacles. Well, it happened to be in the middle of the night. Where are you going to get giant manacles? And one of my players said, "Oh, I know where to get giant manacles," and he proceeded to describe a pleasure dungeon that he goes to. Now, this had never been discussed previously. Yeah, this had never been discussed previously. So at the spur of the moment, I had to come up with an entire pleasure dungeon, populate it with characters, a doorman, a madam, patrons, set the scenario, and come up with a set of giant handcuffs that were going to restrain this character for the night. So as a DM, it's okay to think on your feet. It's okay to come up with wild and crazy ideas. Just make sure you write it down, so in case they want to go visit the dungeon again, you remember the name of the madam.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole writing things down thing. But yeah, the collaborative aspect of world building in a homebrewed campaign, I think that's one of the best things about doing a homebrew campaign is that D&D's already a very collaborative process, a storytelling process, and then when you bring your players into the world building of it, that just increases the little things that you can all add to, and it's a button that we touch on a lot. Is just it adds to the investment of the players if they know that there are things in this world that are there because they wanted it to be there.
They made it so.
Yeah.
A funny
it
thing,
gives ownership.
A funny thing that happened in this current campaign is the players decided that the deity pantheon was actually only one god, and the god had moods. So each cleric or each patron of the god kind of came up with their own concept of the god. So everybody's got a different concept of God, and right now we have 15, 20 different gods in the world that are all the same God. It just depends on what mood he's in that day when you commune with him.
That's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah. All right.
I like that. It's
Yeah,
very
we in fact we've come up with the god of sewage, the god of labeling, the god of travelers, the god of small woodland creatures, because each NPC they come up against has a different concept of God. So we've got to make up a new god for that person to be worshiping.
All right. Interesting.
But it works out to be quite a bit of fun, and we're having a great time with it.
All right.
Yeah, it's because that seems like the kind of thing that it says a lot about either the PC or the NPC. It says more about the NPC than it does about the god. What
Yes.
aspect of the god that NPC is fixated on?
Yeah.
Like a farmer is gonna want the god to be the god of agriculture.
Exactly, and
Banker's gonna want the god of money.
Right.
yeah, we have Glimper, the god of bling.
Hey, there
I
you go.
love
Yeah.
that.
You give me some ideas. Give me some ideas for another campaign. I like the collaborative
Herpetologist
idea.
would love a god of snakes.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that it can go a lot of ways. It's because everybody has different priorities.
Yeah, interesting. All right,
That's fun.
so we're nearly to the top of the hour. So let's
Holy moly, already?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
how time
gosh.
flies. So you've already, so I can't even ask my little like what do you know now that you wish you would have known when you first started? You've kind of been answering that. So rude. What?
Well, yeah, I've had the benefit of listening to the podcast a couple of times. So.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yes. So you got the spoilers.
Yeah, since we do that at the end of the podcast, let me give you a couple of other things that I was thinking about in contemplating being on today. One that you cover heavily, and I just can only reinforce is steal other people's ideas.
Yeah.
If I've given you a good idea, go ahead, please steal it. You don't even need to give me credit. Make it your own, because that's the best way that I learn how to be a good DM and a good player is by stealing ideas from other people. Another thing is today, in opposition to AD&D, like we were speaking before, today backstory matters.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the trope that the D&D character, player character, our parent was murdered viciously by goblins or some other evil has befallen them, and you're an orphan. But if you can build an interesting backstory for your character, it gives your DM a lot to work with. And, I'm fortunate in having my current player characters come up with intricate backstories that I can weave into the adventure as we go along investigating the world that we're in. And then probably the biggest tip that I can give, and this is specifically for DMs, is don't get hurt. And what I mean by that is, at the beginning, when my characters would easily defeat a big bad evil guy that I had created and had nurtured and had loved and set everything up for, and they came up with some unique and interesting way of killing it off or defeating it within 5 minutes, I would get a little hurt and get a little miffed about it. And something that I picked up from Matt Colville is the idea of if you had fun, then I had fun.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that if your players are enjoying themselves, well, then you should be enjoying yourself too, because it's, as I said, it's a collaborative thing. It's something that we're all doing together, and you should really take enjoyment from your characters' triumphs and from them enjoying themselves. Because really, as the DM, you're making the world for them, and you're making a playground for them to play in. And you should take pride in the fact that you're just willing to be on the other end of the table and let your characters run amok in your world.
All right. And
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely had stories. I think like the one that immediately comes to mind is Varun. You're probably gonna remember who actually this was. Was like the DM had set up like it was this like crumbling tower, and then they were supposed to fight this bone dragon, but one of the characters had taken this like basically like a helm that controls dragons and used it to make the dragon go away. and just completely bypassed the encounter entirely. And although the DM was like, "Aw," but the players were so satisfied in their cleverness of just like, haha, we have solved your puzzle.
They
and
figured
as a
it out.
DM, yeah, as a DM, you should be able to exalt in that, and that's where that tap dancing comes in. You pick up the pieces and you move forward, because if you're lucky enough, like me, to have a good group of friends who are going to play this game for a while with you, there will be other adventures, and there will be other moments when you get to backstab one of your favorite player characters.
Yeah,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and if you've ever like planned out some sort of elaborate encounter, and the players like bypass it or solve it really quickly, all that work didn't go to waste. Like, you can always use it again some other time, rejigger it, and then use it later on, or use it with a different group who hasn't faced it before. But
Yeah, if there's like a whole room in a dungeon that would have killed your party, but they bypassed it entirely, take that room, plop it somewhere else, like a Sims, like a Sims house. That's something that like early on in when I was like learning to play D&D and first getting into it, and like something that like I would get stuck on, and like my friends who were like learning alongside me, we would get kind of stuck on. It's like, oh, this thing just went entirely to waste. It's like, if you don't open this exact door, then like you're not gonna get any answers, or you know you're gonna miss like half of the plot. Like your players don't know what's behind doors number 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
As the DM, you have the power to shuffle it around, because it does not. I don't want to say it does not matter. The players cannot tell.
the world isn't real until you actually describe it as such. So whatever's behind those doors, can be very fluid until, the correct decision is made to progress the story.
Like Michael said, the haunted mansion is much bigger on the inside than it looks.
Yeah, exactly. And as the DM, you can switch around the creatures in your dungeon. You can add, you can subtract. You can give larger health pools. You can add minions. You can subtract minions. You can move them to another part of the dungeon, because your players don't know. Like you said, they don't know what's behind door number 1 until they open the door. And essentially, your creatures, your characters, are waiting for your players to arrive.
Ooh, there's one last thing I wanted to ask you about, given the background you come from. Fudging Roles. What is your stance on that? And then, like, back in the day, what was the stance on that?
Okay, so I'm gonna tell a couple of things, a couple of stories about this. One, originally, the DM was supposed to be a omniscient, unknown player. In fact, back in the olden days, it was advised that if you could entirely hide yourself from your players, in other words, like,
What?
there were DMs who literally would put up a screen between them and their other players, so the players couldn't even see your facial gestures or
Wow.
take cues from your body language, and
Oh
you were this
no.
disembodied voice that presented the world. I know, really weird, huh?
That's a,
But
That's really odd.
different type of thing.
yeah. So not only were your roles hidden, but some DMs entirely hid themselves. Which you think about it today, and that's wow, that's really kind of weird. But that was the kind of the idea, was that the DM was this god character that was unknowable. And so in those days, we really definitely hit our roles. Today, a lot of the times, as I'm DMing, I'll roll right on the table in front of my players. Unless it's something that is happening behind the scenes, that they don't know about or they haven't perceived yet. There were no such things really as perception checks or passive perception in AD&D. You didn't. In fact, I don't even think there was a passive perception stat. You only rolled perception or investigation, if they even existed. I don't even remember, when you were looking at something or trying to ascertain something. But today I'll roll in front of my players most of the time, because the dice are the dice, and random things happen in life, and sometimes it's beneficial and sometimes it's not so much. And that's why we use dice as our random generators, as long as they're not old 80s dice that roll forever.
Balls.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I wanted to ask about that because I've literally heard that from a former boss of mine who was also really into D&D. I think I told you about this, Lisa. He and like two other friends were doing a campaign of theirs, and the whole campaign was they were building a castle, and they had to role play and do the roles to build a castle. And one of the very last things that happened was that someone rolled too low on a thing in a very critical moment, and the castle crumbles and it falls down, and like a year of like in-world work is like gone. And I just asked him like, why didn't you all just like re-roll the dice or something? He's like, no, like you gotta respect the dice. Like if the dice say that the castle falls, the castle falls. And I'm like, I had been just starting to play at that point. I'm like, oh my god, yeah. And that is pretty much, that was the moment when I stopped like fudging the dice at any point, because I had done it once or twice in the beginning, just to fit the scenario. But now I'm just like, yeah, and that got into the thing of like, I don't always know what's best. Like sometimes the players will, sometimes the dice will throw a curveball and the players will come up with something even better than what I thought.
Yeah, and like I said, random stuff happens in life. None of us get up in the morning and think, "Oh, I'm going to get in a car accident today." But
Yeah.
it happens. Sometimes life throws you a curve, and just like in real life, D&D can throw you a curve, and you just roll with it and keep going.
And yeah, just from my experience and this piggybacking on the collaborative thing, the players will almost always think of something like better than what you thought of for them to get out of like a bad situation. Okay.
But it's been a wild trip, and once again, I got a shout out to the friends that I'm playing with. A few years ago, I just got the yen to play D&D again, and I was fortunate enough to find a group of guys who lived really close to me, within like 5 miles, who were looking for players. I found them on the on Meetup, I think it was, and a little bit of a funny story. I was so excited my first day. They wanted to meet me before they let me join the group. Oh my God! And there's I have stories and tips about how to handle group interaction. That's a whole nother topic. But anyways,
we'll have you on again and we'll get into that.
I was so excited to meet the group, and it happened to fall on daylight savings time. And I had set my had forgotten to set my watch, and they told me, "Oh yeah, show up about 1 o'clock." And I'd forgotten to reset my watch, so I showed up an hour early. And I was like, "Okay, I'm ready to go." And they're like, "What are you doing here?"
Okay.
But I was just so psyched to be able to play D&D again, because I just have such a deep and unabiding passion for the game, and think it's just a great way to get together with friends. And I play a lot of online games too, and sometimes some of those can be toxic with personalities and such. And I've always found that with D&D, you can be with the biggest group of idiots who just don't know what they're doing and still have a wonderful time.
Oh, I think that's a great note to leave off on.
Yeah. Michael, you have anything to plug?
I really don't have anything outside of what we've been talking about to plug or to shill. It's been great being on the podcast, and I do truly mean this. Anytime you guys want me to come back and share some stories or be part of the podcast, I would love to do that.
Oh yeah, do a whole other episode, like you said, on just like vetting people on social, handling social interactions with D&D. That's we haven't even touched on a lot of that yet.
Oh yeah, start writing down your thoughts, because we'll get to them. We'll get you back.
Excellent.
All right. With that, adieu. Go live your lives. Go roll some dice. I don't know. I'm not your mom. I'm not gonna tell you what to do. Bye.
Adios, folks.
Yeah. Go be a dice goblin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oops All Dragons is a group effort. Our show is edited by Noel Hernandez, our theme was composed by Brendan Lyons, and our logo art is by Azif On Q. Links to more of their work and their social media will be in the show notes.